Welcome back to Vintage Car Chronicles, your daily deep dive into car history. Available on Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, and YouTube. Today, we're going to be looking at the Dodge Dart.
Ooh, the Dart.
Yeah, from its beginnings in 1959,
Okay.
all the way to when it was discontinued in North America in 1976.
It had a pretty long run.
Yeah, it did, and, it went through a lot of changes over those years.
It did. It did. It really embodies the changes that were going on in the American automotive industry.
Well, I mean, it went from a full-size car to
Yeah.
a compact car and spawned some pretty iconic muscle car variants in between.
Yeah, like some really cool cars came out of that Dart lineage.
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting story, and, it's a story of adaptation and competition,
Yeah, definitely.
and really some seriously cool cars.
Some really cool cars.
So yeah, this will be fun.
I think this will be a good one.
So we're going to uncover the real reason why the Dart was almost named the Zip.
Zip? Oh, I know, right?
Yeah, that's funny. Can you imagine? Like a Dodge Zip.
That sounds like a scooter.
Yeah, like some kind of Vespa or something.
Yeah, not a muscle car.
Not a muscle car.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also going to look into how its taillights caused a safety uproar.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about those taillights.
Back in 1961.
Yeah, they were trouble.
Yeah, they were so low they were practically invisible.
Yeah, it's a big design flaw.
Yeah. And we're going to delve into the surprisingly complex history of models like the Demon and the Dart Sport.
Ooh, those are good ones.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. So the Dart, it was born in 1959,
Yeah,
and it was actually born out of necessity
that's right.
because Dodge dealers were in a bit of a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been relying on Plymouths as their entry-level offerings.
Yeah, they were like the budget-friendly option.
Right, exactly.
Mm.
But then corporate decided that Plymouth was going to strike out on its own.
Yeah, they wanted to make Plymouth its own separate brand.
Right. And so Dodge dealers were suddenly left without a budget-friendly option.
Exactly. They needed something to fill that gap.
And that's where the Dart came in.
Yep, that's where it was born.
So they basically took the Plymouth Savoy
Mm-hmm.
and gave it a Dodge makeover.
A little bit of rebadging, some styling tweaks, and there you have it.
And there you have the Dodge Dart,
Exactly.
the first generation.
Yep.
And almost had a very different name.
The Zip. Right.
Zip.
We were talking about that.
It's just mind-boggling.
Like, what were they thinking?
I don't know.
I guess they wanted something catchy.
I guess so, but Zip. For a car.
It just doesn't fit, does it?
It just doesn't fit. It sounds like a toy car or something.
It does. It sounds like something a kid would play with.
Yeah, not a full-size car.
Thank goodness they went with Dart.
Yeah, thankfully they did.
Yeah.
But, speaking of bad decisions,
Uh-oh, what did they do now?
the 1961 taillights,
Oh, yeah, those were a disaster waiting to happen.
they were placed so
It
low
was so low.
that they were practically invisible to drivers behind.
It's like they didn't even consider safety.
Yeah, it was a huge safety hazard,
I mean, can you imagine driving behind a Dart and not being able to see its brake lights?
especially at night.
Yeah, especially at night. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it was a big controversy.
It was, and Dodge eventually had to offer auxiliary taillights as a fix,
Could you imagine?
like admitting they messed up that badly.
Yeah. So they had to go back and fix it.
Yeah, they kind of had to.
Then in 1962, the Dart went on a bit of a diet.
A diet. What do you mean?
Well, they downsized it.
They made it smaller.
Yeah, they made it smaller.
Why would they do that?
Well, apparently Chrysler had this idea that Chevrolet was going to downsize their full-size cars.
Oh, so they were trying to preempt the competition?
Yeah, exactly. But they were wrong.
Oh, so what happened?
Chevrolet didn't downsize.
So the Dart was just kind of stuck in the middle.
Yeah, it was in this awkward in-between zone.
It wasn't quite a full-size car anymore, but it wasn't a compact either.
Right, it was like this weird automotive limbo.
Poor Dart.
I know, but this is where it gets interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
Because in this sort of in-between phase,
Mm-hmm.
we see the emergence of some serious muscle.
Ooh, now you're talking.
The Max Wedge 413 V8 engine.
Now that's a name that commands respect.
That's a beast of an engine.
It was designed for drag racing, right?
Manly, yeah.
So they took this kind of awkward mid-sized Dart and turned it into a drag strip monster.
Exactly. It was like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Totally. You wouldn't expect that kind of power from a car that looked like that.
And it shattered records on the drag strip.
Yeah, the Max Wedge Dart was a force to be reckoned with.
It really put the Dart on the map in terms of performance.
So even though it was in this weird size category, it still managed to make a name for itself.
Yeah, it did. And that performance legacy would continue as the Dart evolved.
So what happened next? Did they finally figure out what to do with it size-wise?
Well, in 1963, they almost killed it off.
What? They almost discontinued the Dart.
Yeah, they were seriously considering replacing it with the Lancer.
The Lancer.
I know, another interesting
Yeah.
name choice.
So the Dart almost became the Lancer.
It almost did, but at the last minute, they had
Yeah.
a change of heart.
Thank goodness.
I know, right? They scrapped the Lancer name,
Hmm.
and the Dart lived on.
So the Dart got a second chance?
It did, and it was reborn as a compact car.
A compact car, so they finally embraced the smaller size.
They did. It was a bit longer than the previous Dart, offering more interior space.
So it was more practical.
Yeah, and it retained that classic A-body platform that would become synonymous with the Dart for years to come.
So this is where the Dart we all know and love really starts to take shape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's finding its identity as a compact car.
Okay, so it goes from full size to kind of mid-size to compact.
Yeah, all in the span of just a few years.
That's quite a journey.
It is, and it's just the beginning.
I'm intrigued. What happens next?
Well, in 1964, they introduced an engine that would change everything.
Ooh, a new engine.
A game changer.
Tell me more.
The 273 V8.
The 273.
Yep.
That was a pretty potent engine for its size.
It was a compact, lightweight V8 that brought a whole new level of performance to the Dart.
So this is where things start to get really interesting.
This is where the muscle car era really starts to take hold.
Okay, I can't wait to hear about this. This is where the Dart really comes into its own.
It does, and we'll dive into all of that right after this break.
So that 273, it really, it was perfect for the Dart.
Yeah.
Dodge really tapped into something special there.
Yeah, and in 1965, they actually released the Dart Charger.
The Dart Charger?
Yeah.
I thought the Charger was its own model.
It was. It was a year away from becoming its own model.
Okay.
They released a special edition Dart Charger in 65.
So it was like a pre-Charger Charger?
Yeah, you could say that.
Interesting.
It was basically a Dart GT hardtop,
Okay.
painted this bright yellow
Oh, wow.
with a black interior, and of course,
Cord.
the 273 V8 under the hood.
So they were already hinting at the performance potential of the Dart.
Exactly. It was like a little sneak peek of what was to come. And, they added some premium mechanical parts
Okay.
and special badging to make it stand out.
So it was a pretty special car,
It was. It was a limited edition model.
which makes it a collector's item today.
Oh, yeah. Big time. But more importantly, I think it really showed that Dodge was serious
Yeah.
about turning the Dart into a contender in the muscle car market.
It was the sign of things to come.
Yeah. And then in 1967, they completely redesigned the Dart.
Yeah, that was a big year for the Dart.
A wider chassis, a whole new look.
Why have a big change?
It was all about performance.
Ah, okay.
That wider chassis allowed them to fit in bigger, more powerful engines.
That makes sense.
And that paved the way for the Dart GTS.
The GTS, now we're talking.
Now we're talking. The model that really solidified the Dart's muscle car status.
Yeah, the GTS was a legend.
Is Dodge's answer to the Chevy Nova SS.
The competition was heating up.
It was a real battle for muscle car supremacy. And the Dart GTS was right there in the thick of it.
What kind of power are we talking about here?
Oh, we're talking serious horsepower.
Okay.
A340 V8 was the standard engine.
Nice.
But you could also opt for a 383 big block.
Whoa. A 383 and a Dart.
Yeah, can you imagine the rumble of that engine in a compact car like the Dart?
It must have been a beast.
It was. It was a total thrill ride.
But wasn't there something about the 383 model?
Yeah, there was a catch.
What was it?
No power steering or AC.
Oh, no. Can you imagine trying to park that thing on a hot day?
Especially parallel park.
Yeah, that would be a workout.
No power steering, a big block V8. It would be a
I
challenge.
bet.
But the GTS wasn't the only high-performance Dart out there.
Really? There were even more powerful versions.
Oh, yeah, there were some hidden gems.
Like what?
Well, some dealers, they took it upon themselves to create even more potent darts.
So they were like modifying them.
Yeah, like there was the 440-powered Dart GSS,
GSS, what's that stand for?
Grand Spalding Special.
That's a mouthful.
It was a dealer-modified beast.
It sounds like...
And then there was the holy grail of darts,
Okay, what's that?
the ultra-rare Hemi
For
Dart.
Hemi Dart. Now that sounds legendary.
It was built purely for speed.
What made it so special?
They basically shoehorned a 426 Hemi engine into a lightweight Dart body.
Whoa, a Hemi and a Dart.
Yeah, these things were rockets on wheels.
They must have been incredibly fast.
Oh yeah, they were capable of hitting the quarter mile in the 10-second range.
That's insane.
It's hard to believe they could squeeze that much power into a compact car.
So the Dart goes from this sort of awkward mid-size car to a drag strip monster.
Yeah, it was quite a transformation.
It really shows the potential of the Dart as a performance platform.
It does, but keep in mind, only a handful of Hemi Darts were ever produced.
So they're incredibly rare.
Oh yeah, they're a true collector's dream.
I can imagine.
So we've got the GTS, the GSS, the Hemi Dart.
Yeah, the muscle car scene is in full swing.
It is. But as with all trends, things eventually start to change.
Yeah, what happened to the Dart as the muscle car era began to fade?
Well, in 1970, we see a bit of a shift in focus
Okay.
with the introduction of the Swinger.
The Swinger.
Yeah, it was still sporty.
Okay.
You could get it with a 340 V8.
So it still had some muscle.
It did, but
Okay.
it was more about style and affordability.
So it was like a more toned down muscle car.
Yeah, you could say that.
A muscle car for the everyday person.
Exactly. It was the Dart's response to changing tastes.
Makes sense.
And then in 1971,
Yeah.
Dodge unleashes another model that would become synonymous with the Dart,
Which one?
the Demon.
The Demon. Now that's a name that grabs your attention.
It does.
Was it as wild as its name suggests?
It was basically a Dodge version of Plymouth's popular Duster,
The Duster. Yeah, I remember that one.
with a few styling tweaks to give it that distinct Dodge look.
So it was like a rebadged Duster.
Pretty much.
Interesting.
But it definitely had that muscle car attitude.
I bet.
But the Demon name, it caused a bit of a stir.
It did. Why?
Well, some people found it a bit too provocative.
Provocative. How so?
Well, you know the religious connotations.
Ah, I see.
And so in 1973,
Yeah.
the Demon was rebranded as the Dirt Sport.
So the Demon was banished,
You could say that.
replaced by the more subdued Dart Sport.
Right.
But I imagine the performance spirit lived on.
Oh, absolutely. The Dart Sport 340 was a worthy successor to the Demon.
I see.
Still packing a punch despite the name change.
Okay.
But by the mid-70s,
Yeah.
the muscle car party was winding down.
That's true. Things were changing.
Emissions regulations, rising fuel prices,
Yeah.
changing consumer priorities. It was putting a damper on the whole performance car scene.
It was a tough time for muscle cars.
It was. It was like the whole automotive world was doing a U-turn.
So how did the Dart navigate this changing landscape?
Yeah, it was a tough time for performance, but Dodge, they still tried to keep the Dart's spirit alive.
Yeah.
They introduced some special editions,
Yeah.
like the Hang 10 and the Spirit of 76.
Oh, yeah, those were classics.
They were fun.
The Hang 10 with its surf-themed graphics.
And that, outrageous orange shag carpeting.
Pure 70s.
Pure 70s nostalgia.
Yeah.
And then the Spirit of 76 all decked out in red, white, and blue.
For the bicentennial.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to capture the mood of the nation
Yeah.
in a car.
I think those special editions were really smart,
Oh, yeah.
from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
They tapped into those pop culture trends, and they gave the Dart this kind of unique, almost whimsical personality. It's like Dodge was saying, hey, we might have to, dial back the horsepower,
Yeah.
but we can still have some fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh?
And they're highly sought after by collectors today,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
which speaks to their enduring appeal.
Yeah.
They're a reminder of a time when car design was a bit more lighthearted.
Yeah, a bit more about expressing yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just about, fuel economy and stuff.
Yeah. But even with those flashes of creativity,
Yeah.
the writing was on the wall for the Dart.
It was.
In 1976, the Dart took its final bow in North America,
The end of an era?
replaced by the Dodge Aspen.
It has been, yeah.
It's amazing to think that a car that started out as basically a rebadged Plymouth
Right.
became such a cultural icon.
It's true. It had quite a journey.
What do you think it was about the Dart that resonated with people?
I think it was its adaptability. Yeah. The Dart was constantly evolving, mirroring those shifts in American culture and the auto industry. It went from full size to compact, embraced the muscle car craze,
Yeah,
and even tried to adapt to the fuel efficiency era.
I did.
It was never afraid to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately what allowed it to stay relevant for as long as it did.
It's a story of survival.
Yeah.
The Dart was like a chameleon, always changing its colors
That's a great analogy.
to blend in with the times.
It worked.
And in doing so, it became an icon,
It did.
representing different things to different generations. It could be a family car,
Yeah.
a performance machine.
A style statement.
It all depended on the era.
Exactly.
And it was affordable,
Yeah, that was a big part of its appeal.
which is huge,
Not everyone could afford a, high-end muscle car,
right?
but the Dart made performance accessible
Yeah.
to a wider audience.
It was the everyman's performance car,
That's a good way to put it.
a car that could be both practical and fun.
Yeah. The best of both worlds.
It's fascinating to trace the evolution of a car like the Dart.
It is.
And to see how it reflects those broader social and economic trends.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about the rise of the muscle car, the impact of safety regulations, the shift towards fuel efficiency. It's like looking at a microcosm of American automotive history.
The Dart's story is a reminder that car design isn't just about sheet metal and engines.
No.
It's about capturing a moment in time,
Yeah.
a feeling, a cultural shift.
Yeah.
And the Dart, throughout all its transformations, it managed to do just that.
Well said. The Dodge Dart may be a car of the past, but its story continues to fascinate and inspire.
It does.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of the Dodge Dart.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed the ride. And remember, there's a new episode of Vintage Car Chronicles available every day. So be sure to subscribe and join us again for another journey through automotive history. Until next time.